So this video, I'm going to show you how I repaired the tile on my pool, the waterline tile, not the coping tile on the top. So I went to open my pool and actually had a couple loose, and then I started pulling them off, and I found it was like quite a few tiles to pull off. So I pulled them off, or they kind of worked off anything that was loose, and then I went and pulled off any of the backing or any of the mortar there, any of the grout, anything that was loose or wet, just to make sure I had a kind of a completely dry surface, and then scrape it off with a screwdriver, with a scraper, a couple different tools, anything I get, and then actually left it for a day, I think maybe a day and a half or so, just to make sure it was completely dried out before I started putting the mortar on, or the thin set. And so I have links in the description for the different tools or the different products I use, like the grout or the mortar that are specifically for pool. So if you're interested, go check those out. And I'll just jump into the video here where I'm actually starting to set the tiles. So this is what it looks like when it's prepped already. And you can see I have sealed the crack, and then everything that's loose is come off. So there's a little bit of grout that's still there, a little bit of the thin set, but this is all ready. And here's all the tiles I had to pull off. It was quite a bit of work. I think it was like about 16 or 17 feet worth of tile. So I like to kind of line them up just to see what the pattern I'm working on, just to get an idea, just to have a visual of it, because I'm actually working upside down. And there's a lot of little pieces there. Just kind of get a look and see what I think is going to be the difficult part. Sometimes you can actually drain the pool or enough to stand in there, but it's like 60 degrees in there, and I didn't feel like standing in that for 5 hours or so. So again, just laying them out here, just get an idea. I wouldn't do the whole pattern, but I just kind of look at it. So then when I look at it you can see that repeating pattern, just get an idea of how you're going to be laying them out. So you got to start off with the thin set, or the kind of the mortar. So you need kind of scooping. This is why I like to use this little tool, especially in this narrow area, just to kind of put it on, be able to put on the small tiles. I like to have wire brush. I was actually using that to clean off the pool side and also the back of the tiles, and a little hand brush just to kind of get into little nooks and crannies there, or anything loose. I also have this carbide bit on the Dremel, just to kind of get in again in little cracks, anything that's difficult. And then you're going to need the tile, the gap. This is a 1/4 inch. I actually had to, most of it was 1/4. A couple places it looks like it was small and it was like an 1/8 inch. But I was able to use both of those. And so had to go through and just clean off all the tiles. I was cleaning off the mortar as best I could. This part I probably didn't need to. It was stuck on there really good, but I usually just like to clean it off, everything, just to make sure I have a blank slate I'm working with. So you get it cleaned off, and then take the wire brush like I was showing, and just make sure if there's anything loose is removed. So here's the thin set, or the mortar I'm using. It's specifically for pools. They actually want on the directions, they say drop it about 4 inches, the water about 4 inches below, so I've already done that. And then they give you it doesn't give you the actual ratio, but you just kind of like, by eye, do it really slowly, because you can always end up putting too much water in here. But you want it like a thick putty consistency. It's a little bit thin here, but I get a little bit more. And then I actually like to have shade, because I didn't do this. I started off and it started drying off pretty quickly as I was working on it. It wasn't holding as well, so pulled my umbrella over. So either go into shade or just don't mix as much. So here's a view showing. So I'm just putting it on the wall first, on the cement or the concrete there. And then it's really tough just because of these the shape, so I ended up using my finger. Probably should have had some gloves on there, because this is a cement mix. It's not the best on your skin. So I just kind of worked it in. I didn't do the whole thing, but just enough, a couple tiles, so you can just kind of keep a wet mortar mix on there. So as you're adding the tiles, it's no parts drying out. So again, I just kind of worked it all in, just to make sure it's got a good connection on both sides. So get on there, and then back butter. I've heard some people say you don't need the back butter, but it's really easier for me, especially on these small little tiles. So I butter the sides or the back of it, and then use the triangle trowel, and just get just a little bit on there, so that you're not having too much. So you want to have a bit of airflow in between, so the mortar can set. So again, you can see here with the shapes, it's kind of without glad that I looked at it beforehand and kind of lined up, how I had need to do it. And you can also work with the pattern. So I found that putting the big pieces in here first, or the larger one, was easier than trying to work those little pieces in there just because of the gap. So now I'm getting these little tiny ones. They're only like an inch by a half inch or something like that. So I got those all set. And sometimes, some of them, the mortar was just thick enough that I didn't really need to put in the tile spacers. But it was, I got them set there and then just holding onto the wall. And here's what they looked like. So it showed up pretty good. Like I said, I didn't really need the tile spacers. And there's a POV view of the same thing as I was working. Again, back buttering the tile. Add a little bit extra there just because the top was a little bit thinner on the wall. So again, put the tile in there and then work it and then set it up. And then here's where I worked at this whole side. I still got to have to do inside the skimmer. But you can see I switched those white, which are 1/8 inch, just because whoever originally did it didn't maintain the same gap. And again, I didn't need it everywhere, just any places where I saw that the tile was moving. So I left that cure for a day, and then I moved on to the tile grout. So this mixes up pretty much the same. The only difference is this has a resin, kind of a glue that gets put in there. You can see it's in this little container. So when you go to add water, just keep that in mind, that you need a little bit less water. So again, just slowly mix it in there. So I put in the, again, here's what I'll just give you a view of it. Just looks like a thick kind of Elmer's glue looking consistency. And then you want this float for putting in the tile grout that gives you that cushiony, kind of helps you work it into the joints a little bit better. So I don't know if you noticed on there, it was 1.5 pounds or 2 ounces, but I didn't want to mix up that much, so I did 3/4, just a half of that. And then I need to put the resin in, and I didn't have a really good way of measuring it, so I just kind of eyeballed it. I don't think it had to be perfect. I've used it before, and it worked out fine. So I kind of put a little hole where I think would fill in about 1 ounce, and then put it into that, and just kind of, again, eyeballed it. And after I had done with the mortar, I kind of cleaned that off too, so when there's a clean surface for this grout to go in. Always better just to get a little extra. So again, see, adding the water just really slowly here, because again, you see that resin is obviously a liquid, so you need a little bit less water than if you just normally put water with the grout. Here's a speed up, because I'm sure it's not interesting watching me mix this up. But again, I want to get it to about that same consistency where it's like putty, and you can actually hold it on your trowel and it doesn't fall off. So here you see it's getting pretty good consistency, what I like. You can see I'm actually turning it on the side and it's not falling off, so that I know it's going to pack the joints and not fall out. One thing I found was helpful, just to keep my hand underneath it, so you're not just dropping so much of it in the pool, just making a bigger mess, and also just to kind of being able to reuse that, because it's difficult doing it upside down like this, so quite a bit of it was falling. And also trying to get it in all those joints and at the top between the coping and the tile. And then again, there's so many angles here, it was a little difficult to do it. Here's what it looks like, just kind of, again, POV view as we're working it in. And if you notice, there's lots of it falling into the pool, so this is why I was kind of catching it. Especially you have to go at different angles because you want to pack those joints. So if you're just doing it from one angle, especially if the tiles aren't perfectly flat, you might get a little bit of it might not be pushed all the way down in there. So once you're done, working it, you give it about 5 minutes to set, and then what you want is a pretty, just a slightly damp sponge, and you go in and just kind of clean off. You can see to the left, I've done that one already. But this one actually let it set a little bit too much because I was messing around with the camera and things. So you can see it's sticking a little bit, but it's not too bad. The grout really doesn't stick to the glaze on the tiles. Just kind of work it out. Don't work too hard into the joint or you'll just pull it out. You want to let it cure in there. And here's after I finished it. And I let it set for like another hour. You can see it's easy just to go across any of that glaze to get off of the get it off the tile. So on the left, I haven't cleaned it off yet, and you can see inside there it's a little bit more of a mess, but it's really not difficult once you just kind of keep that sponge damp and just kind of keep wiping it again, not too hard to pull any of the grout out. And here's what it looks like. So it was done, came out really good. So I just started filling the pool back up. I actually left it for a day just to cure. Again, I think it's a couple hours, but I wasn't in a big rush. It had already been out for like several days. So just fill it up and you're good.